Okay. What is a contract? An agreement between two or more persons, individuals, businesses, organizations, or governmental agencies to do or to refrain from doing a particular thing in exchange for something of value. Contracts generally can be written using formal or informal terms or entirely verbal. We do not acknowledge verbal in Texas. In most states, we do not. They are, I mean, they will hold up in some courts, but for example, in the state of Texas with the auctioneering laws, we absolutely have to have a written contract, okay? I've known auctioneers that never had a contract. They were handshake people. Let me tell you something. You can't do that anymore. You might have been able to do it in the 50s. You can't do it today. You want to be able to have it be enforceable in court. People have selective memory. That's what we've discovered over time, is people have selective memory on what they agreed to, on what they said they would do, and what they're going to get paid, and a variety of things related to auctions and real estate, and you just have to have it in writing. And let me tell you, I deal with this all the time. I just dealt with a very painful negotiation outside of Dallas on a couple of $1 million property. Should have been a clean deal. And the guy that we were trying to negotiate a sale with, let's just say he was less than reputable, and we could have sued him when it was over. We did close, we did get funded, but he beat my seller out of about $50,000, and he knew he did it. It was my seller's fault, it wasn't my fault. My seller agreed. He read his own contract and sent it to him without me knowing it. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, well, I don't know, you know, I read it and she read it and we signed it and we sent it to him. And I go, well, that's $50,000 you'll never see again. Yeah.
Would a video recording of a verbal contract hold up in court?
Well, I think you could certainly use that as, you know, you could use that. Sure. Look, there's all types of video that is used in court. I just did, I was involved in a $20, $30 million lawsuit in New York. It wasn't against me, I was a witness. And they used a lot of video. A lot of video was used in the courtroom. And you're going to see more and more of it. And as long as we keep having pandemics and things of that nature, people aren't going to court, guys. That's like we were talking about closing on real estate. You know, you heard Scott was talking about, you know, going to the title company and we're not doing that anymore. I do everything. I close all my real estate right here on this phone. I can DocuSign pretty much everything I want to, and I haven't been to a title company in 2 years. So, you know. Film is admissible in court. When conducting auctions, a written contract is mandatory. In a contract, if one side fails to live up to his or her part of the bargain, there is a breach, and certain remedies for solving the differences are available. In my contracts, I put a breach clause in my contracts for auction, that in the event that the seller does something, like decides they don't want to have a sale, I'm going to get paid something. In some cases, I'm going to get paid what I would have been paid. I'm going to have a fee plus what I would have been paid and any expenses. I always make sure all my expenses. If I have expenses, or I have people that have expenses, or I have advertising that we've already spent, all that's going to come back to me in the contract. Yeah.
So would that be, you would get paid based off the contract saying this auction should bring this and this amount, or would you have to have an appraiser come in afterwards to get that amount?
No, the way mine is written, it is based on my opinion.
Your appraisal.
My appraisal. My personal opinion of value.
So same as a cancellation clause, like let's say.
You can have a cancellation clause.
And
I have had a clause where if they cancel the sale, I get a flat $5,000.
Right, and that's the same as the deposit?
Could be.
Could be, okay.
And by the way, in the business that she's in, of fundraising, I do require deposits. I want at least 50% up front for any
50%?
event that if you want that date on my calendar, I want 50% up front of whatever the fee is gonna be for that
For
day
that
or
event.
evening.
Okay, thank you.
And, yeah. Okay, terms of the contract, the who, what, where, when, and how of the agreement. These are the terms. We actually saw that in the advertisement a minute ago. A lot of the who, what, when, where, all that. But it's the same thing for a contract. And it defines the binding promises of each party to the contract. Okay? You really need a contract written in plain English that's easy to follow, that's not complicated, and then you need to have an attorney review your contract and tell you if something needs to be changed, because contracts are important, guys. I mean, that's how you make money, you lose money with your contract. Okay, what are the key elements to a binding contract? Number one, the most important part of a contract is you have to have competent parties. What is a competent party?
Not inebriated and over.
Can't be under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Over 18?
Let's back up.
Sorry.
Okay.
Competent parties. What about Alzheimer's?
No.
They have to be of sound mind. I have had multiple situations where a farmer who lives out on his place and it's just him, and he's been there for 50 years, and his wife died, and he's still alive, and it's 30 years later, and he's crazy as a bed bug. During the daytime, at certain hours, he is perfectly lucid and making all good sense. But then at a certain hour, it's like you turn the switch and he changes into a different mindset. Back during the Western Auto times, I got a phone call from Monahans, Texas.
Oh,
Get a call from Monahans.
that is good.
The guy says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about having an auction. I said, great. And I said, when are you thinking about doing it? And he said, I'm ready. And I said, well, I've got a Southwest flight heading to Midland, Odessa in about 2 hours, and I'll be at your place about 2 this afternoon or 3 this afternoon. I get out there, and I'm one of these guys that if you call me right now, you get me right now. If I'm available, I'm going to go get that sale. Nothing's going to stop me. Because I believe that the person that responds quickly gets extra points. And if I spend money to do it, you even get more points. So if I say, yeah, I'm going to fly out and I'm going to get a rental car and I'll come see you. So I meet the guy at Dairy Queen, the international place to meet in Texas. And so I meet him at Dairy Queen, and he's great, and he's had the business for 50, 60 years, just the nicest guy. We agreed on a sale. We came up with a date. I had a contract. He read it over. We signed the contract. I got back in the rental car, drove back to Midland, Odessa, flew back to Dallas, got out at Love Field, went across the street to my office. About 2 hours later, 7, 8 o'clock at night, I get a phone call. I'm in my office. I'm still there. I get a phone call from this lady, and she's just irate. I mean, she's lost her stuff. And she's, she didn't call me anything, except she implied I was a crook. And that I had taken advantage of her father, who has Alzheimer's. And I said, well, I met your father for the first time today, and he didn't seem to have Alzheimer's when I was with him. And we signed a contract, and we agreed to sell his business. And she said, well, everybody knows he's got Alzheimer's, and people have been taking advantage of him, and they've been writing checks out of his bank account, and all of his employees have been taking advantage of him, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, listen, this is what I do for a living. I'm going to give you the name of a guy in Kansas City who I've worked with for the last 10, 15 years. We've sold hundreds of his stores, of the same type of store. I said, and your dad knows this guy. I said, you call him and you ask him if I'm a stand-up guy or not. And if he tells you that I am not, then we'll tear the contract up and I'll walk away, because I'm not here to take advantage of anybody. And she called me back about 30 minutes later, apologized, She was sorry,
Poor thing.
because she,
It's sad.
she was under duress and stress, and I'm sure she dealt with more than one call like this before, only on different matters. But this was the big one, because this was selling his business. So anyway, we did come to terms, and we did sell the business, and we went on down the road. So they have to have competent parties. They need to be 18 years of age, okay? Or what?
Emancipated.
Or have-
Emancipated. So what's emancipated mean?
It means you're considered an adult.
You're released
By
from your
law.
parents.
Emancipated means that,
Or from
you've
the
gone
court.
through the judicial
The court.
process and gone before a judge, and the judge has granted you the authority as a young person to act as an adult, even though you're not 18 years of age. Are there any other instances of that?
Yeah, if a woman under 18 is pregnant or has a child, she's emancipated in Texas. Yeah, I do know that medically, they can make their own medical decisions.
A married couple of minors can also enter into agreements and act as husband and wife in all affairs related to adulthood, under the age of 18. So, husband and wife, okay? So those are instances. Are there any others you can think of? Those are the main ones. You gotta have, but if you have any of the other things, they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs or something, then the contract is null and void. And you have to have consideration. What is consideration?
Money.
Consideration can be money, but it doesn't have to be money. A lot of times I used to sign auction contracts, and instead of taking money, I would take something I wanted. Like one time I had an auction in Crum, Texas, and he had a 1972 Cheyenne pickup that was like brand new. It didn't look brand new. It was sitting under a palm tree, and it was covered with sap, and it had black all over it. But it was, when I had a service station, took it back to our service station and had it detailed out, and it looked brand new. So I traded a certain amount of the percentage for the pickup and just took the pickup.
Well, so do you give that consideration back, or is it yours? Oh,
No, he gave me the title and the whole 9 yards. Other thing is, I've taken guns, instead of taking advertising funds. Maybe somebody had guns, but they didn't have any money. And so I would take guns, in consideration for advertising money. But you gotta have consideration. You can't have a contract and it not be in exchange for something. It can be money or it can be something else. Mutual assent, or meeting of the minds, which means you have to be thinking on the same lines. You have to be thinking whatever you're trying to accomplish, you have to be on the same page, is what that means. You have to be on the same page. One person can't be thinking one completely opposite thing from what the other person is saying. That's why I want my contracts to be very simple English.
So, like how many pages you think your contract is? Mike, how many pages do you have for a benefit contract?
One person thinks.
Oh, I don't have long contracts. She's asking about benefit auctions. My benefit auction contracts are 2 pages.
2 pages.
That's it. And I don't want any more than that. You create more than that, you're creating your own headaches.
Yeah, my lawyer
Keep
said
it
one is
simple.
like 6 pages. It's too much
No.
stuff, right?
You're not selling real estate.
Okay.
You're not selling some extensive business. In an offer of a contract, you have the first steps and offers, the other party's acceptance of the deal. I've got an auction that's kicked off this week. I think it's kicked off this week in South Carolina on 167 acres on a mountaintop. We started receiving offers last week. As the offers came in, we have a fiduciary or financial responsibility to our seller to present all offers. So even though these people are coming in with an offer that are not a part of the actual auction, they're trying to avoid the auction process. Kind of like the one we were talking about with Scott and I this morning. We were talking about the $6 million deal. They wanted to circumvent the auction. I don't care if they. Fine, I don't care. You give me an offer that my seller is willing to accept, the auction's off, as long as I can get that thing closed. And so I'm dealing with a lot of back and forth right now on contracts.
If you do that, you have to Like, and people don't know that, so you have to still be there day of the auction and say, hey, how do you handle that, I guess? Like that?
Well, first off, we require people to register to participate in the auction. So we know who, number one, has the funds and you know, the ability to perform on a contract. So we already know who the players are. We're not just having people walk in off the street and say, hey, I want to participate. We have rules in place that requires people to, they have to meet certain requirements. If I sell that before the auction, we're just going to pick up the phone and call them and tell them my seller was presented an offer that they accepted, and they want to accept it, and they want to take it. Now, could we, in the negotiations, say, okay, Billy Bob, I know we got this offer for $800,000, but we have some other people who have shown great interest in this property. You may be leaving money on the table. Are you sure you want to just sell it? And they may say, no, you know, we want to take the best offer we can get. Well, then we need to go back to these other people and say, he's looking at all offers right now, so, and he's going to take the best offer he gets. So if you're interested, you need to go ahead and make us a real offer now that we can present to him. And basically, what have we done? The auction's already started.
Yeah.
We have an auction going. It's just not on the internet. It's a private auction negotiated back and forth between the parties that we have.
So sometimes that can be a realtor too, can't it? But they're still going to use your auction contract, correct? They
Yeah.
don't use the promulgated auction.
That's right. That's right.
You run into that somewhere, you got brokers come in that hadn't done that before?
Oh, I just got one.
They got one from you.
Yeah, I just got one from a South Carolina guy, and they turned it down. I mean, it was like, no. And here's the other thing. We have an auction contract right now in place, and if you make a pre-auction offer, you have to live with our auction terms, which is, there's a 10% buyer's premium. So if you offer me $2 million, you're going to have to include another $200,000 to cover your buyer's premium.
On top of the contract.
Because the final contract price will be $2.2 million if $2 million is your offer. Because we're going to take that right off the top.
So when you're dealing with just a straight real estate, I mean, you got some weeds you want to walk through with, I mean, or you could get in a jam.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So when you write these contracts, like she was talking about earlier, her attorney, but do you have some people you could point us to if we started doing auctioning, to an attorney to help us with our contracts?
You know, it's funny, you know, and you're United Countries, so you understand. We've been kind of put in an awkward position because we don't like to make recommendations to certain professionals, because if they screw it up,
Yeah.
then you're mad at me and you're mad at corporate. And so we've made a practice of not doing that. Now, I'm not saying that if you called Kansas City that they might say, yeah, here's a guy. You know, I mean, I do a lot of things with, hey, here's a guy. Here's a guy I use. I'm not warranting what his work is. I'm not on his payroll. I'm not getting paid anything, so you can talk to him, but I'm not going to promise it's, you know what I mean? Burn.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to negotiate back and forth, and hopefully we'll have performance on the contract. You have different types of acceptance. Express is a direct and absolute outward manifestation of agreement, such as I accept your offer. You know, I don't know how many of you have had that situation, but I mean, literally, I've bought a house that way, where I walk up to the guy and say, hey, would you sell your house? Yeah. What do you want for it? I don't know. What will you give me for it? I'll give you $300,000 for it. Okay, let's do business. We'll get the contract drawn up. We'll do it. That's what that express, and implied is the acts of the parties show that the offer has been accepted, such as when both parties to a contract begin to perform the terms of the contract. Well, that can be, you know, that can get dicey. You know, people get excited about buying something, and then they start doing some things, and then sometimes they may get a little buyer's remorse, and then, or maybe the wife says, well, that's fine, you can buy that if you want to, but you'll be living there alone. But that kind of puts the hoodus on the deal, man. You know, I've seen every situation in the world. I'll tell you a real quick one. So my ex-father-in-law, he was an auctioneer, So my daughter's grandfather was an auctioneer, and we were best friends. And when he was president of the Texas Auctioneer Association, I was the vice president. That's how close we were. And so, and he was an electrical contractor. So when you drive up and down the North Dallas Tollway, all of the electric substations running south of the Galleria, he built all those.
Wow.
So he was very successful in the electrical business, and he loved auctions, and he lived in Gainesville with Texas Power and Light, where I grew up. So I mean, we all kind of knew a lot of the same people. Bottom line is, he had a horse auction, a horse equine property in Allen, Texas, right over here near McKinney, where I live. It's been 25 years ago. It was an absolute auction. And anytime you hear the word absolute, guys, get nervous, because there can be something go wrong. And it was a divorce situation. Man and wife wanted to get divorced. They wanted to be happily unmarried. And they did an auction, and they got a price for it. They said sold. And then when it came time to sign all the paperwork at the end of the afternoon, the future ex-wife refused to sign the paperwork. And everybody explained to her, you realize by not signing this, because she owned half of it, by not signing this agreement, we did an absolute auction in the public eye, and everybody knows it's sold. And when you say sold in an absolute auction, it's over with. And she absolutely refused to sign, and she was willing to risk it, and they all got sued, and they all lost, including my ex-father-in-law. So that's why you will probably never witness my name on an absolute auction. Okay?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
The auction company got sued and they couldn't sell the property?
They couldn't sell it. No, she wouldn't sign the paperwork.
So how does that fall on the
Yeah.
auction company's shoulders?
I'm telling you, he was included in the lawsuit. He lost. They lost. Now, maybe his errors and omissions insurance kicked in. He may have gotten covered by that, but I know it created a lot of angst and unhappiness in our house for some time because of that auction. Listen, when you say absolute, and if there's more than one party involved, and it ain't you, you can't control everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking any chances. You can do whatever you want to. You can
If you
live by the
don't say
sword,
absolute,
live by the sword, die by the sword. Mike Jones ain't dying by no sword.
if you don't say absolute, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a reserve. Does it?
You can offer that property and tell everybody, here's what usually happens with mine. I'll advertise that I'm auctioning off, public auction, 167 acres, mountaintop, blah, blah, blah. People will say, is it absolute? And I'll say, no, because we don't conduct absolute auctions. And they go, oh, so it's reserved. I said, no, I didn't say that. I'm telling you that we don't advertise absolute auctions because it's an abused word in our industry, and it's been abused by many companies that use that as a hook and with no intentions of selling it to the highest bidder. They create a negotiation from it. We don't do that. We're simply going to offer it to the high bidder and let the seller decide if they want to accept it or reject it. Because that's the terms in all my sales. When it comes to real estate, the seller has the right to accept or reject. Now, we have our own document that tells me exactly what the seller is willing to take for the property and at what point they will sell it absolute. But that's between me and the seller. So when it brings that $1.2 million, I know we're selling. And then I can really get to negotiate. Okay?
But you can't disclose that because that'd be against your client's best interest if you said our bottom dollar would be, so you can never disclose that.
Yes, I'm
You're
not.
looking out for the client.
I have a fiduciary responsibility. And what if I give that information out and then it's misconstrued by a family member or one of the relatives or one of the other owners, because a lot of times we have multiple owners that have a piece of it, and then all of a sudden they're saying, well, your auctioneer told them that they'd take $1 million. Well, when we've already agreed, that we gotta get $1.2 million for it. Now, we've got somebody saying that the auctioneer said that they'd sell it for $1 million. See, if you don't participate in those conversations, then, and everybody knows that Mike Jones doesn't tell anybody anything,
That's how I agree.
then we have a record of how we conduct our auctions and what I do. Because I want it to where, no matter what happens, if they can go to 10 of my previous sellers and they can verify how I conduct my auctions. And I don't give away information. I make everybody negotiate till there's no blood left in the turnip. Okay? You know, it would be fun if I had the time to tell you stories about different situations. We're not afforded the kind of time that, and for those who care about such things, you learn a lot from those situations, from negotiations and from things that happen, good and bad. I've had bad things happen. You know, I don't run an auction school to sit here and tell you how great I am. I'm here to tell you everything that can go wrong so that when you leave here, you don't let it happen to you. See, we didn't have that going for us when I went to auction school. Most of the instructors I had 40 years ago, we got to hear all the great things that they did. I wasn't hearing any of these train wrecks. I thought everything was great, you know?
Mike, one question I do have though is now, like, let's just say they don't go to close.
Yeah.
How do you insure your money? Because he didn't put it up to you in the beginning, right?
Well, give me the example.
So like the seller, if you do that $2.2 million and you haven't put any money into this point, so it doesn't go to close, but how are you going to get paid then?
Well, I'm still not quite following what your scenario is
Like if you have
about the
a fixed contract.
2.2. Why wouldn't I have gotten anything down?
So that's what you do on all your real estate, is you get money down?
When
So if he
when we strike the sale down, the minute we strike it down, we are either standing there or we have a process. See, I require you to give me money just a bid at my auction. So you're not gonna just show up on $1 million auction and not have any skin in the game at all. We're gonna know that you have the financial stability to buy it and close it. We're also gonna get $25,000 to $50,000 down from you in our escrow account. And if you buy it and fail to close, we're taking your 50 grand.
No, I'm talking the other side. If the seller decides that he doesn't want to close it, how are you getting paid then at that point? Now you got to sue him, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, not only am I gonna sue him, see, you make me sound like a bad guy. I'm going to put a cloud on that title. He's not gonna be able to give that property. He can't do anything with the property until he satisfies my lien, and I'll have a lien on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't mind waiting. I don't mind waiting. I really don't care. You know, if the guy doesn't wanna sell it, and they go, well, we're not gonna close. Okay, fine. Yeah, we're not going anywhere. We're gonna go ahead and place a lien on your place, you know?
And you would,
And see, they don't see that coming. They don't think you'll do that.
So you-
It's not a problem at all.
so you can do it for that price that you appraised it at of what you thought you'd get paid, right? If he breaches?
We're gonna have the T's crossed and the I's dotted in everything related to this situation, to where they're going to pay me what I've got coming. Because I'm gonna have documentation. You know, here it is. Here is where my seller stated on this date that they were going to auction this property. And it's in the contract. And at $1 million, the sale is an absolute auction. So if I get $1 million or more for that property and they don't close, they breach the contract. And I may have some other remedies in there. There may be something else. And remember, my advertising, I get all my advertising up front. You know, when I was with corporate in Kansas City, the most I ever got for advertising was $699,000 up front for advertising on one project. And they had to wire the money before we would start. That's why I talk about contracts, because I'm the most serious person in the world when it comes to business. Yeah, I don't like losing money, and I'm a super fair guy. you know, and if I need to let somebody out of a deal because, you know, it's the right thing to do, I'll do the right thing. But I will not be taken advantage of.
Just a comment on contracts. I mean, my dad always told me, always get a receipt and always, you know, make sure you have people sign when they, because your own family will, even your own family get signed. And me and my dad we'll sign stuff between us. Well, my neighbor was selling, she had 2 houses right across the road from my house and some acreage. Well, I wanted to, as soon as I heard it through people that it was selling, I went right over to her. We looked everything over and I gave her an offer and I gave her $20,000 cash. And I didn't have a contract or nothing yet, but I just wrote something up and I had mom and dad look at it and I had my mom sign it, my neighbor sign it, and I think my hired man signed it. So we had, you know, witnesses and everything. Well, then she decided to sell it out from under me. And I had that, and that's all I had. And I went to the lawyer and she had to pay me $20,000.
Back.
Yeah, she had to, I got $20,000 on top of it because she breached that contract.
Wow.
That's why we have contracts.
But as simple as that was.
Okay, let me keep going, because I don't want to get behind. Must the contract be in writing? It depends primarily on the nature of the subject matter of the contract. There are some oral agreements that can be deemed as legal. Can you name one?
Yeah,
When?
I'm sorry. I was agreeing. Sorry.
Okay, there are some oral agreements that can be deemed as legal.
Oh,
Video evidence?
What?
Video evidence?
or like, I mean, can you,
That's not what I'm looking for.
like a handshake? Like a handshake deal?
Well,
Or witness?
let's just think about the world.
Okay.
In what class are you in?
Auction Academy.
When does something change hands at an auction?
When you say,
When you say sold at an auction, or you strike the gavel down, or the hammer,
Oh.
if you're in Ireland,
Yeah.
that's an oral contract, and it will stand up in court. And that's what that big lawsuit I just got through dealing with in New York City was about, whether they sold it or not, whether it was sold or not. I was a party to a lawsuit, not an actual party to, but I was involved with an auction company in South Texas on about a 30,000 acre ranch. We went down to do this auction. Good friend of mine was the auctioneer. In fact, we just had his funeral about a month ago up in Oklahoma City. Great auctioneer, Hall of Fame auctioneer, past president of the National and the Oklahoma Auctioneer Association. And we're at this auction, and we've got 30,000 acres, and we've got this 10,000 acres over here, and 10 over here, and 10 over there, and I'm just rounding it off. And but it was all subject to seller confirmation. Remember that. Seller confirmation. What's that mean? It means the seller has to confirm the sale, right? So he's up here, and he's got, I don't know, 10,000 acres at so much an acre, probably 1,500, maybe not that much, 1,000, 1,200 an acre. But it's a historic range.
Okay.
It's been 30 years ago.
Was this so pre Eagle for Shell play?
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
a long time. This is back when the auction school was new, probably 93, 94. I'm a ring man. I'm just there as a ringman. Don't shoot the ringman. You know, I'm over here, yep. Auctioneer's over here. And we get the high bid, and remember, it's subject to seller confirmation. It's in all the advertising. It was spoken orally. But then when he struck it down, he had the high bid, and he said, sold, subject to seller confirmation. The gentleman that was bidding was represented by a state representative, who's an attorney, and they filed a lawsuit. And said the fact that he used the word sold was what they understood. So they tried to claim ignorance.
Wow.
And it was a very expensive experience.
What was the
The
outcome?
final terms were never disclosed. I'm just telling you that it did go through a process. My guy was also, the auctioneer was also an instructor at this school who taught real estate auctions here for many years. And he also handled our $10 million deal up in Lincoln, Nebraska on Cushman. There are pictures of him doing that auction. And a very, very buttoned down realtor. I mean, he was licensed in more states. He's probably licensed in almost 50 states. But it doesn't keep you from getting sued by somebody who wants to challenge the legal system. So just be careful what you say in regard to sold. The word sold is gold.
That's
Okay.
why they said posted earlier. They used posted when you did the lots with Scott.
Scott?
Scott who said they used the word posted instead of sold.
Yeah,
Is that where
and-
that came from?
Well, when I do, and I've done a lot of real estate auctions like that, I'll say suspend the bidding. I don't even get close to the word sold. I learned my lesson 30 years ago when I was 30-something. So it's like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, the high bid at this time is $3,200 an acre. I'm going to suspend the bidding at this time and consult with my seller. Don't say a word about the word sold. Now, I had to come back in and converted a reserve auction to an absolute auction, and then took bidding from 700,000 to 800,000 to another 300,000 or 400,000 and sold some property. That's another whole story. I won't even go down that road. As a general rule, it's wiser to have the terms written in understandable language, plain English, to save future misinterpretations and errors. Statute of Frauds. Statute of Frauds refers to the requirement that certain kinds of contracts must be made in writing and signed. Although the laws vary from state to state, the most common examples of contracts that must be in writing are below. Sales of real property, promises to pay someone's debt obligations, a contract that takes longer than 1 year to complete, real property leases that run for more than a year, contracts for an amount of or other consideration that exceeds the state's threshold, a contract that will go beyond the lifetime of the one performing the contract, the transfer of property upon the death of the party performing the contract. So, for example, Lori and I, about 15 years ago, I think, we flew to Nashville to look at Sheryl Crow's ranch, the singer. We met her sister Kathy, who met us at the ranch, and we toured the ranch. And while we were looking at the ranch, it's about 800 acres, I think, in Franklin, Tennessee, which is like gold. There was a tract of land up on top of the hillside, and you could see it. There was an old farmhouse. They kind of looked down over this 800 acres, and she said, that's our property too, but we can't do anything with it right now. And so that's a situation that we're talking about here too, because the farmer that owned that property had sold the rights to the property to Sheryl Crow and her family, but in a life estate. So remember life estates. It's kind of like, I want the house next door to me, I want the ranch next door to me, I want the farm next door to me. I don't really have to have it right now, but I want to get it now, I want to pay for it now. And the guy's 90 years old, he can live there as long as he wants to, and then upon his passing, then it will, we'll take possession. Okay? Just remember life estates. Does a contract have to be notarized? No, not typically. This is a requirement that there is a requirement that some documents be notarized, such as a real property deed. Unless specifically required by state or municipal law, a contract does not have to be acknowledged before a notary public. When does a breach occur? When one party to a contract makes it impossible for the other parties to the contract to perform. In our situation as an auctioneer, one situation where we may have a breach or we may have a problem is where we have signed up an auction to liquidate a farm. Let's just use that as an example. A farm. We have agreed in the terms of the contract when we're going to come set up the sale. And then we get there and it is padlock closed and we can't get on the property. Have they breached the contract?
Yes.
Yes, they have, because now they're keeping us from performing our duties that we agreed to do. That is a breach. A party to a contract does something against the intent of the contract. Well, there's kind of a combination here. A party absolutely refuses to perform the contract. That's somebody that cancels the sale. So that's one. There's many ways that you could, well, I'll give you another example. Well, let's say we have a farm sale and there's 5 tractors and we have negotiated a contract. I have 5 tractors to sell. They range in price from $10,000 to $100,000 each. We have figured our commission based on the main items in the sale, which are those tractors, especially the top 3 or 4. We may have $500,000 worth of tractors or more, maybe $1 million. I don't know, it depends. And then we get out there to get ready for the auction and there's 3 tractors missing. Guess which ones are missing? The best ones. And then trying to find an owner to tell us what happened to the tractors. And maybe you're dealing with a corporation. Maybe you're dealing with Exxon, and Exxon owns this ranch. Believe me, oil companies own things, corporations own things, individuals own things. We get out there and we can't find these 3 tractors worth $300,000 or $400,000, and it represents $40,000 to $60,000 worth of commission. Am I upset?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm upset. So I make sure I have in my contract, if those 3 tractors aren't there, guess what's going to happen?
You still get you paid.
Commission goes up, or you?
Well, I'll tell you what I do, and this is me. You can do whatever you want to. You know, if you get sued doing what I do, then sorry. But I've had situations where some really key items were missing. First thing I'm going to do is have my staff, whoever's working setting that sale up, start talking to the ranch hands and find out what happened to those 3 tractors. I'm trying to find those 3 tractors. I want to know where they are, and I want to know, and if they sold them, because they usually sell them. They usually sold them. Oh yeah, we sold it. You know, the ranch hand knows where those tractors went, because the ranch hand had to be there so they could pick those tractors up. And if you can ever get your people to kind of become friends with the ranch worker, now we've got a pipeline of information. And we know that one tractor went down the road 3 miles and take left at FN 1416, and that's, in fact, we delivered that tractor. And he paid $140,000 for it, or $80,000 for it. I'm going to get my facts straight before I do anything. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to call the seller. I'm going to point fingers. Hey, you son of a gun, you took those tractors off that property. We didn't agree to that. I am going, at some point, I'm going to ask, where are the tractors? And then they'll come up with some cockamamie story about how, well, you know, I let my brother-in-law have one of them. You hear all kinds of stories of what happened to these 3 tractors. Well, here's what I'm going to do. If I don't find out exactly who got the tractor and how much it was, then it's in my contract that I can put a value on that tractor. I'm going to put a value on each of the items that are missing, and if it's $100,000, it's $100,000. Maybe it's $100,000 each. There's $300,000 worth of tractors there. They're gone. We're going to create an invoice for the seller. That's what I'm going to do. I create an invoice for the seller as a no sale. Goes out for $300,000. Here's what the commission would be. It could be 10 or 15%, it could be $30,000 or $40,000. And then when we get through selling that whole auction, and that auction brings $800,000 or $200,000, whatever that number is, I'm going to deduct my commission that's on that statement. So that when I settle with them and give them all their paperwork for all the invoices for everything we sold, they have their own invoice in there. And here they are. XYZ Ranch Company, here's the gross sale, here is the commission. Oh, don't forget the buyer's premium, that's in there too. And then deduct the total of the tractors so that you don't have that. But you have it in the gross sale, but you deduct it at the end, and we get our commission going down the road. That's what I've done for 30 years. I have contemporaries in this business maybe Scott or somebody like that, I don't know, whoever, not Scott, because Scott usually goes along with whatever I do, but, sometimes to his detriment. But, you know,
That's funny.
there's a lot of my friends in the auction business that don't have the cahuntes to do that. Because they don't want to have to go up against the owner, because they're scared of the owner. And I'm not that guy. It's a business. You know, you showed me these tractors, you told me they're in the sale, and now you're taking food out of my baby's mouth. That's the way I look at it. This was commission based on what I saw. If those tractors had not been there, I wouldn't have charged you 10%. Might have charged you 20%, or 18%, or 15%, whatever the number is. But a cheat's a cheat.
That's a bait and switch.
And all they'd had done to pick up the phone and say, Mike, you know, I'm gonna have to sell, I already promised my brother-in-law I was gonna sell that tractor. I should have told you when you were here. I didn't. But lot number 307, you know, I sold it to him last night. He's coming to get it, you know. Charge me whatever you need to charge me. That's the right thing to do. But a lot of people don't do the right thing anymore. It's just, oh, he won't care. Well, I care about $30,000, $40,000.
We had went to an auction that was advertised, and there was some great stuff on the sale bill. When we get to the auction, we're looking for this stuff, it's not there.
Yeah.
And the family had taken.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And see, when I look at an auction, I make it very clear to them that this stuff has to be here, or there's gonna be an issue, and you're gonna have mad people. I'm gonna get paid for what's not here, and all these people that show up for the auction, they're gonna be mad, and then we're gonna make sure they know, y'all took it, we didn't have anything to do with it. This was a family decision. I'm not here to protect their image. If they pull stuff, you know, many times I've done, looked at an estate. I had a guy call me from Oklahoma City one day, and he said, hey, Mike, can you meet us in Gainesville? We need to have an auction. I said, yeah. And I show up there in south of the square, and I look at all this stuff, and it's a good auction. And I'm walking through, and I said, well, that's a really nice china cabinet. Yeah, but it doesn't go. Now, he had told me on the phone, everything sells. That got me to drive from Dallas to Gainesville on Sunday afternoon, because everything goes. And there's some guns on the bed. Well, they don't go. My brother's coming from California. He's going to have those shipped to him. I go, you know, this is my whole point. I don't sign a contract. I don't move forward on anything until I know exactly what's going to be in that sale. Okay, if there's any question marks about it, I'll come back. You let all the relatives go through. I'll come back in 2 weeks and we'll take a look at it. Now, see, what's probably going to happen, in the meantime, some other auctioneer is going to come in and get the deal because I left and didn't sign a contract. But you know what? I'm better off. I'm better off not to waste my time on a deal that's not going to be a great deal. Okay? Don't, and here's the other thing I don't want you to do. Never quote commission on the phone.
Oh.
Ever. Never quote commission on a general merchandise, estate, consignment, equipment. Never quote commissions on the phone. Because here's what happened. You get a phone call. Hey, Mr. Jones, this is Miles, and you know, we're thinking about having an auction on Mama's estate. What do y'all charge? I said, well, we don't do phone quotes. Well, just in general, what do y'all charge? Well, that tells me they've probably got another auctioneer that's already looked at it.
Yeah.
They may have another auctioneer that they've already made a decision on.
Yeah, they're shopping.
They just want to confirm that they're getting a decent deal for an auctioneer. I'm not even in the running on it. And so I'll just push them on. I said, look, if you want me to come look at it, I'll be happy to come look at it. But if you know, I don't offer phone consultation on commissions for anything at all.
Can you hold all your stuff up to the phone? Yeah. That's what I tell them.
I'll just tell you, I just don't waste my time because I've been screwed over. Every time somebody calls me to do a phone quote, I never get the deal. I've never gotten the deal in 40 years. So we don't do phone quotes. Okay? That's pretty good with that. Okay. These are things you need to know as you go forward, and these are things that need to be in your contract. I want you to know this. I would want to know this for my test.
Okay. Thank you.
Key points to an auction contract. Date of agreement, parties entering into the agreement, legal names and qualified parties. Look, just because a guy says his name is Bill Johnson,
Doesn't mean
his name is Bill Johnson. Or I go by Buck. Okay, what's your legal name? And I need the legal name on that contract. I don't use, we don't want, nicknames. Responsibility of the auctioneer. So this contract is going to define what your job is going to define what the seller is supposed to do, what's their responsibility, list of items to be sold. If you have a contract, you probably aren't going to list everything you're selling on that contract. If it's just a couple of items, that's one thing, but most of the time you're going to put list attached Exhibit A, Johnson Estate, and then you'll have a separate sheet or 10 sheets of paper that, list all the items that are going to be in that auction. So you do that as an Exhibit A. It's kind of an additional piece of paperwork. Location of the auction. How many times have I gone out and looked at an auction and maybe we're selling the stuff, but we can't sell the stuff there. Maybe we're in a gated community and we can't have the auction inside the gated community and we're going to have to remove everything. Then you just put under location, you put to be determined. Same thing on the date of the auction event. You may not know that, when you look at the auction, you may not have the ability to determine for sure what day that auction is going to be. Maybe you just put within 90 days or within 120 days or date to be determined. General terms and conditions will be in there. Special terms and conditions and hazardous materials. Who's responsible if there's hazardous materials on the property? I've had a lot of auctions where we've had hazardous waste, and who's responsible for that? I'm not going to take responsibility for any hazardous waste. I will, however, line up a professional company to do work to remove hazardous waste or to do a phase 1 study on the property, something along that line. I did an auction on a company over here, well, I would say over here, it's not over here, back in Dallas. I was up against Ritchie Brothers. We won the deal. It was a bankruptcy. And it was a company that had trucks, utility trucks that would go out to construction sites and they would they had repair equipment. So it'd have like a welder on the truck and they would do like mobile oil changes on construction equipment and all that kind of stuff. And they went broke. And on the property off of I-35 on Stemmons Freeway, that's where they were located, they had waste oil in the ground, in tanks, and then there were 55-gallon drums of waste oil all over the property, and there were 55-gallon drums full of used oil filters with waste oil. And so they wanted that stuff removed. I said, we'll be happy to arrange it for you, but the bill will be sent to the trustee in the bankruptcy, because we're not going to assume any hazardous waste. Okay? Good negotiable title. You need to have to be able to provide good negotiable title if that's the case. Or a list of encumbrances, mortgages and liens, and who to contact, who the banker is, what the payoff is, the location. Just to put Chase Bank down doesn't work, guys. If you're working through a particular Chase Bank or Wells Fargo location, you need to have a banker. You need to have contact information for who has the payoff and how to get the information you need. You can't leave yourself high and dry because you'll get burned. Yeah.
So what about names and entities? Like, I might have Nick Czar, Czar Ranch, Czar Feeders, Czar Farms.
Yep.
And I own all this stuff that I'm trying to sell.
Yep.
Do you do 4 contracts? Do you include it all together? How do you handle that?
It's going to depend on how you bought it. Because if you bought it under one company, this is where it gets shaky. because it can get very strange really quick, and I've dealt with some really ugly situations. We're gonna run lien searches on all those entities with the Secretary of State's office. We're also going to run tax searches in the county that we're working in. We're big on searches. You know, I will do an IRS lien search in the county as well. That's where we're gonna do that. But the Secretary of State, you're gonna see the word Secretary of State's office multiple times on your test. Because the Secretary of State's office is where we check liens for the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC 1, those are business assets. Okay? And there's the Uniform Commercial
So I
Code.
got a question on that. A lot of times in a commercial contract, they will say like the buyer's gonna check, do a UCC search or whatever, or the seller. Now, do you do that as the auctioneer? I mean, I know you understand why you're doing it, because you're trying to protect yourself, but I mean, as far as sharing that with anyone else, that's just for your own use, right?
I do my lien searches, but also in my contracts, I've dealt with some pretty shisty people over the years. I sold out a lumber yard in downtown Dallas one time, this has been 35 years ago, and there were over 100 lien holders.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to do a lien search on all 100. Yeah, that was expensive. That one taught me a lesson. And my lesson was, put in the contract that we're gonna run a lien search on you, Mr. Seller, and you're gonna pay the bill. It's true. In fact.
So you can look on the Secretary of State's website, but if you want to do a formal lien search, they charge, you go through an agency to do that, correct?
I do. I do not do my own lien searches.
Right.
I pay a third party they specialize in it. There used to be a company called Capital Commerce Report in Austin. They sold to a company called UCC Direct, and I believe they're still in business, but if they're not, they sold to somebody. And so you just go through a company that specializes in lien searches and let them do all your lien searches. Yeah. And they'll do different ones. They'll do stuff for the Uniform Commercial Code, and they can also do the stuff on the county level for taxes and personal property tax. Yeah.
In Kansas, it's only, and I don't know if it's nothing's by serial number, just entity, right? Is that how it is in Texas?
Depends on how deep they dig, because if you have a company that's really good at doing their lien searches, we literally, I sold a John Deere dealership about 25 years ago, and we literally pulled every finance statement. We printed off every contract on every piece of equipment that had every serial number and matched everything. It was expensive. It was several $1,000s just doing the lien search. Yeah.
So let's say you're in negotiation with the seller, talking the contract over, and this subject comes up, you say, are there any liens on your property? I don't know, in good faith, they say, oh yeah, everything's fine, and you say, no, I am gonna have to verify this, and we're gonna run, but it is a charge on your account.
Yep.
And then they say, well, no, we'll go ahead and take that. Do you still, and they show it?
No, I'm gonna do it anyway.
You're gonna do it anyway.
They don't have an
And you're still gonna hold
Yeah.
ground that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are.
that's not
Officially,
negotiable. That's not negotiable. Why would I be? The one most important thing going on in this whole deal is the fact that there could be liens on it. That's the one thing you're gonna get burned on the most, is if you sell something you don't own or have good negotiable title on. So, no, I'm not negotiable. This is what we do. This is our SOP, our standard operating procedure.
So this for land or for like, you're going to a farmer to sell them out is just as farm
Well, right,
equipment?
the conversation we just had was about equipment. That's what we were talking about.
So you have in there,
But now, if we're gonna talk about property and searches, now we're talking about going through a title company. And I'm gonna go through a title company, and I've got 4 or 5 that I work with. I work with the largest in the United States, and I don't pay them a dime up front. So if I do an auction for them here in Dallas or wherever, in any state in the union, it's Fidelity, they will do a full lien and title search for me, and the understanding is when we sell the property, hoping we do sell the property, then they'll collect their money at that time. So it's not my opinion. I'm always using somebody else's opinion.
so So that's what we should have in your contract to sell the farmer out, that you're gonna have to pay this, and, because we're gonna check all
That's
this.
what I would do.
Okay.
That's what I would do. Listen, there's some of these farmers that are corporations. They think they can do anything they want to, and you're under their thumb. Well, I'm not playing that game with anybody, okay? I'm just not. Every time I've ever conceded anything, I got burned. Every time. I had a guy right here in the Colony, Texas. But it just made me mad just thinking about it. Scott Swenson's still mad at me over this. I took this guy's auction, and it was going to be an absolute auction on about 40 pieces of property. He had all this rental property all over North Texas, and Pilot Point, and the Colony, and Denton, and Louisville, and it was an absolute auction. He wouldn't sign the paperwork. Didn't hit his reserve that he had in his mind.
That's what Scott talked to us about.
We didn't have a reserve. We didn't have one, and it was, $15,000-$20,000 later that we got burned on that because it was our advertising money, because we upfronted the money because we're having an absolute sale. I don't like absolute sales. So anyway, all right, let's wrap this part up. Commissions, flat fees, expenses, no sales, whatever you're going to charge them, however you're going to charge them, you got to have it in there. And if it's not written in there, you're not going to get it. Prior disposal of the property, we already talked about it. Tractor disappears, I'm going to charge them. Termination and breach, we're going to have some remedies in there. Maybe it's a $5,000 cancellation policy. I only had to charge a $5,000 cancellation policy on one Western Auto store in 25 years, and it was in DeKalb, Texas.
DeKalb, Texas.
If you know where DeKalb, Texas is, it's up there on the way to New Boston, up around New Boston area. Avery, Texas, that's where I have relatives there. And I had signed a contract with this guy, and he was shady. I knew he was shady. I should have known better. I was in my 30s. And so he canceled the sale. And we have all the money out because, it was supposed to be everything selling, and we didn't require him to put it really hardly anything on advertising. We did all the work. And anyway, so my stepfather, who was not exactly the friendly type, he was angry most of the time. And he was the perfect person to send to DeKalb to get our money for our breach. And so he goes to DeKalb and to get our money, and then the seller jumps out of his chair and runs out the back door trying to get away. And evidently my stepfather caught him, and we got our money. Let's just put that. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to indemnify. I don't want to get in a situation where we can come back 25 years later. About 3 weeks later, that building burned down, and it was very interesting. Some of you would remember a singer from the 50s. Well, if you remember the TV show, none of you kids would remember, but Ozzie and Harriet, Ricky Nelson, and Rick Nelson was coming here. I believe it was 83. It was 83, 84. He was flying here for a concert for New Year's Eve. He was coming to play at the Anatole here in Dallas, and their plane crashed outside of DeKalb. And when that plane went down, and all the fire trucks and all the volunteer fire department went out to that plane crash, that building burned to the ground that night.
They died?
The Western Auto Store. Oh yeah, they're already killed.
Oh my God.
Anyway, the things you remember about stuff like that. Okay, make sure you have the signatures, you have the right people on the contract. I never let anyone represent me in a contract. I don't care if it's on an auction, or if it's a consignment auction, or anything, Some auction companies have representatives that go out and book business. I never was willing to allow anyone to sign on my behalf. You bring the contract back, I'll review it. If I buy into it, if I like your work, I'll sign off on it. But if not, I don't want to be responsible for something you make a mistake in.
When you say seller's signature, that is like a husband and wife, if they're selling in the state of Texas, both parties have to sign the contract in case one of them dies, the other one has authority to finish out that contract. But in a situation like this, if you're selling an estate and there's children involved, would each one of those children that are participating in that sale need to be on that?
No, the executor will. Whoever the executor is, that's who I'm working for. I don't have to have all the players. I have, whoever is the, assigned the executive, whoever the executor or executrix
Right,
is over that, that's who I'm dealing with.
right.
And most of the time, if it's a complicated thing, there's attorneys involved. I mean, if you know if it's a messy deal,
Yeah.
and I've dealt with messy deals. So, no, we try to keep it really as clean as you
Well, I did
can.
work for King Charlie Hillard when he died in that plane crash.
I remember him.
Yeah, and his wife, if we would have had her signature on the deal, she could have just said, hey.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, any questions about that? Yeah, let's knock it out. We're gonna go ahead and give you one more handout, and we're gonna quit at 7 o'clock. Why don't you, here's what I want you to do. Take 5 minutes, just take 5, and I mean 5. Be back in so we can leave at 7. And if I take it to 7:05, yeah, it may be a couple minutes after, but I want to cover Uniform Commercial Code, which relates to what we just